on a minute ago. I don't know what happened. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and His Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Apparently we have all sorts of fun technical issues. Are you good now? Uh-oh. I always feel like this reading we heard today loses something when it's out of context with the rest of the stories around it. Now, you can still get a message out of it, and it's still a great story, and it's a story that's familiar. But it always seems to me that especially what happens before this story really helps us to understand what's going on and why it plays out the way it does. So we need to go back to the beginning of the chapter that we were reading from in Mark. When Jesus one morning gets up and decides to take a few of his favorite disciples on a special mountain hike. For those disciples, the day starts out pretty well. Peter, James, John, and Andrew get to climb the mountain with Jesus, and they have this incredible experience. They see Jesus robed in glory and in light, and they hear the voice of God and their ancestors Moses and Elijah appear to them. They have this amazing experience. And even though they get a couple things wrong along the way, they make some comments that aren't the greatest, they can't shake this sense of holy that they have. But on the way back down the mountain, Jesus tells them not to say anything to anyone about what they've experienced. Now think about how that's going to work. You get down the mountain back to the rest of the disciples. Hey, Pete, how was your trip? What did you do with Jesus all day? Oh, well, we took a walk and Jesus might have told a couple of stories and there were some rocks and a couple of trees and really good look at the top. Nothing special. When really what he wants to say is, oh my goodness, you should have been there to see what we saw. We heard God speak, and we saw Moses and Elijah. And did you know he's got a really big nose? But we saw him, like for real. But he can't say any of that. He can't talk about it. And then we discover that the rest of the disciples have been having a really horrible day without Jesus. They met someone who wants to have his son healed. The son has a demon, and the demon is throwing the kid around, causing seizures, and the father wants the disciples to heal him. They can't do it. And so they spend the better part of the day trying to cast out this demon and kind of looking like fools because they can't do it. So when Jesus arrives back on the scene, he criticizes the disciples, asks the Father for faith, and then in the end, he drives out the demon with a prayer, much to the confusion of his disciples. And then they start off on the road to their next stop, the next town. And once again, Jesus starts talking about death and dying and leaving the disciples, and the disciples are silent. They are afraid and confused and concerned about Jesus talking this way, but none of them are going to say anything because the last time Jesus talked about dying, somebody did try and say something. Peter tried. He tried to rein in this talk from Jesus, and Jesus basically called him the devil incarnate in that moment. Nobody wants to earn that nickname, so they say nothing. So as the disciples travel along, to pass the time, they have a conversation. And some of the disciples have had this incredible experience that they can't tell anybody about. And some of the disciples have spent the day being taken down a peg. And Peter has recently been the rock 1 minute and the devil incarnate the next minute. And some of them are probably feeling a little left out. And some of them are probably feeling a little proud of themselves. All of them are having this strangely difficult day. And they're all confused and scared by what Jesus is talking about. It's no wonder they start an argument trying to compare each other to who's the best one, who is the most important, Who is top dog in this little band of followers they have? And so Jesus takes a child and puts that child in the middle of those disheartened, squabbling, power-hungry disciples. A child who, unlike in our world, has no value in that culture. A child who has no rights as a person until they become an adult, who's supposed to never be heard and never be seen, who is supposed to be invisible to the adult society around them. And Jesus says, whoever welcomes one of these children, whoever welcomes one of these invisible people in my name welcomes me and the one who sent me. And then he also does something else. He ties this idea of welcome to servanthood. He says, whoever is the greatest must be a servant. That the way to the top is to find the bottom. He says you truly welcome someone when you consider them, when you are willing to serve them, to do what's best for them above what's best for you. Now, in our society, children are no longer invisible. They are revered, they're envied, they're cared for, they're held up as examples. Children are often the center of our lives. Children are special. And so while it's important that we hear these words about welcoming children in our midst, they're not the invisible ones in our lives anymore. Jesus talks about welcoming the invisible ones, the ones that we don't notice, the ones we ignore. So who don't you see? Who don't you see? Do you not see the teenager with the eyebrow piercing? Do you not see the homeless person on the corner? Or the elderly neighbor who simply wants someone to talk to? Do you not see the people who are more privileged than you? The ones who seem to be set apart? Do you not see the migrant worker in the field? Or the single mother who can't quite make ends meet? Do you not see the stranger around you? Or the people in your family that you just have never been able to click with? Or the ones who look different from you for one reason or another? Who do you not see? Who is invisible to you? Who would Jesus place in your midst and call you to welcome and consider and serve? As I was working on this sermon this week, I spent a lot of time thinking about that question. Who do I not see? And one of the groups that I realize that I struggle with, that I often don't see or welcome, are people who are on the periphery of my life somewhere. People that I see regularly, that I recognize, but that I don't really know. Because I've never taken the time to get to know them. For example, I play in a wind ensemble, and so for at least once a week for 8 months out of the year, I sit with this same group of people. I sit near them, we play the same music, I have to work with them on things, I agonize over the same things as them, but I have never actually gotten to know any of them. Not even the person I sit next to, really. They are invisible to me. Sometimes they are unimportant to me. I don't welcome them the way that I am called to. So who do you not see? Who do you not welcome? Who is Jesus calling you to recognize and to serve as his follower? This may seem like a really hard question, and it take some time to think about, and I encourage you to think about it a little. It's kind of a hard teaching, loving those people that we've worked so hard to not think about. So it's important to remember that we're not only like the disciples in our story today, we're also like that child. We were nobody, unwelcomed and invisible, but Jesus welcomed us. He took us from the outside and drew us into his inner circle. He let us know that we are not alone, that we are seen, that we are loved. That we are so loved that Jesus would serve us to the point of death and die so that we might live, so that we can be with God. That's how much we are loved and cared for and served. Jesus lets us know we are his children. And like that child in our gospel reading today, Jesus doesn't take that kid and stand him there and take a step back and say, see, here's my example. The Bible is really clear. It says Jesus wraps his arms around that kid. Jesus hugs him and holds him close as he talks about service. And we too are wrapped in Jesus' arms, welcomed and loved. And if we are welcomed in this way, if we know that feeling of what it means to be a part of a community, the reality of being loved, then we can offer that gift to others. We can hold on to that truth in our own lives and work to share it with others, to help them feel welcomed and served, to help them realize that they are loved, to help them feel God's arms around them. We are called to welcome, to consider, and to serve the ones that we don't easily see, the ones who in our lives are invisible. And we do that because we are first recognized, first welcomed, and first served by the one who pulls us inside and wraps his arms